Hello and welcome to our 10th session of season 3 of our Lunch and Learn webinars. We're putting together a significant programme of future Lunch and Learns and in-person events for 2026, and you can find more about these at our website. Our next Lunch and Learn is going to be a Future Home Standard Essentials Forum, Lead Early, Learn Fast, Share Lessons, and that will be next week, next Friday on the 8th of May. Today's session is Smoothing BNG Through Planning and is brought to us by Becky Moberly, Principal Consultant at the Planning Advisory Service, and Paul Dodd, Head of Design Advice at Urban Design Learning. And I looked them up on their website and it says that Urban Design Learning is a not-for-profit organisation founded to support built environment professionals to create well-designed spaces and places. They will speak for around 20 minutes and then take questions, and we will finish at 2 o'clock as usual. To ask a question, please click on the Q&A icon, which is normally to be found at the bottom of most Zoom screens. If it's not there, it may be hiding inside the circle icon, which has the word more next door to it. And that's a circle icon with 3 dots, and click on that and it should reveal the Q&A icon for you to click on. Please keep those questions to topic and don't use the chat function. If you use the chat function, you will confuse me, and I promise you it doesn't take much to do that. We are recording this session and it will be on the members section of our website, along with other past webinars, where as well as being accessible to members, it will also be available to our colleagues in national and local government. I think that's enough from me and enough of the notices. So I'm going to hand over to Becky now, who's going to kick off our presentation. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks very much, Chris. Can you see my screen, or have I clicked it on and off again?
I can see you. I cannot see the presentation yet.
Has it come up now? There we go. I think I clicked the wrong button.
It's there.
Excellent, brilliant. Okay, so yes, as Chris said, that's me, Becky, and also Paul's here from Urban Design Learning, who did the work for us. And I thought it might be useful to start with just to give a little bit of an introduction to the Planning Advisory Service in case you're not familiar with us. Or if you are, what I find is some people think they know what we are, but maybe get it slightly wrong. So I guess one of the first things to say is we're a team of 18. I think that often surprises people because they think we're bigger than that. We also work with peers, so people from councils, folk from councils who go into councils and help them as well, and also other suppliers like Paul, for example. We sit in the Local Government Association, which is a membership organisation for local councils, and we're grant funded. We're primarily grant funded by the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. We also get a bit of funding from Natural England for specific projects. And we have a programme of work that we work to, of which, and all of that is around supporting local planning authorities with the planning system. And that's the sort of existing system, but also any changes that are coming through, of which there are always lots in the planning system. So yeah, one of the projects we are funded for is Biodiversity Net Gain, so helping local authorities and supporting them with the implementation of Biodiversity Net Gain. And I guess I know that obviously we're here with Future Homes Hub today, and that's very much a developer, an organisation for developers. But obviously we are focused on local authorities, and that's where we offer our support. But I think it's just worth saying, I guess the support is often reached by others, including consultants and developers. We know a lot of them use our web pages. We have events. Most of those are only for local government, but we generally share recordings afterwards on our website, so we know those are viewed on YouTube. We have a network of over 1,500 LPA officers, again, to help good practice sharing and help get that consistency, really. So again, hopefully that supports you guys as developers. But I know we've got LPAs in the audience as well. But really to try and get some consistency and sharing that good practice across local authorities. And I just wanted to flag a couple of bits and pieces. We have legal agreement and condition templates for BNG, which we recently updated. As I said already, we share a lot of good practice, and also we have frequently asked questions on BNG. Right, so that's us. And I also thought I should mention, although this is not what this this session is about. And I should say that we are not in any way in charge of BNG policy, but it felt a bit remiss not to mention this, as 2 weeks ago, as you may be aware, um, we had some changes, some publications from government around biodiversity net gain, and that has confirmed some upcoming changes. So we've got some changes coming in imminently. The plan is hopefully from the 31st of July, but that is subject to parliamentary timescales because secondary legislation, it requires secondary legislation which has to go through Parliament. But basically, there's going to be a new exemption for development of 0.2 hectares or less, and that's an area-based exemption. It's not a replacement for the existing de minimis. So, to be really clear, any site for development that's 2 hectares or less will be exempt. The self and custom build exemption is going to be removed. There'll be a new exemption for temporary planning permissions for up to 5 years. And there's also going to be some amendments to the biodiversity gain hierarchy. That hierarchy is basically about, at the moment, the preference is first of all to be on site for your biodiversity net gain, and then to go off site only if you can't deliver on site. And then as a last resort, you can go to something called statutory credits for biodiversity net gain. Basically, it changes the priority in terms of on site and off site, so those are the same. Statutory credits are still the last resort. The publications that came out also set out some stuff that's coming through later in the year. So biodiversity net gain is coming in for NSIPs, nationally significant infrastructure projects, from the 2nd of November. There are going to be some updates to the biodiversity metric and also some new exemptions for development specifically that conserves or enhances biodiversity or enhances parks, playing fields and public gardens. So those were two responses to consultations that were out last summer. There's also a new consultation out on a targeted exemption for brownfield residential development. And that might result in some further changes later on, changes to the de minimis threshold, which is an approach at the moment that means that sites that only impact a very, very small or no habitat are exempt. And also potentially a new exemption for a certain area of residential brownfield, but that depends on the consultation. So I thought it was worth running through that. I am in no way an expert on these changes. I've read the same stuff as you have, or you can read it yourself. Do go and look at if you do a Google on BNG consultation response or something, you can find those. So but I thought it was worth running through that. Okay, so what Paul and I are here to talk about is some work that UDL, Urban Design Learning, have been doing for PAS around collating good practice in biodiversity net gain implementation. So again, as I said already, this is aimed at local authorities and it's about local authority best practice. But one of the projects was specifically about LPAs and planning applicants working together. So we did Paul and his colleague Miriam did speak to developers as well on that one. So Paul, I think we were going to have a little bit of a chat on this slide, weren't we, about
Yeah,
why we decided to do this work. So yeah.
yeah, of course, yeah. So, the 5 reports that we've written for Becky and the team really focus on different aspects of good practice. We talked about calling it best practice, but really what it's about is good practice, and gaining some insight into each of those areas to kind of spread consistency across the country for both local planning authorities in implementing the BNG regs, but also in terms of developers and the relationships between them and local planning authorities. So really it was about being effective in your planning approach, in your ecology approach, making better decisions, saving resources, providing consistency across the country, and supporting the people that will be on the call today, primarily it's interested in Future Homes Hub developers and their agents in making better planning applications. So all of those things speed up the process, and because we know, and I think we'll all know on the call, that local planning authorities have severe restrictions in terms of their resources, and it's really about making those resources work as efficiently as possible to ensure planning runs as smoothly as possible to deliver what we want from BNG. The ultimate intention really for Becky's team and Chris as well is to develop BNG as a business as usual approach, and that's what we're hoping for.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. Okay, so that's the projects overall, and I'll skip on to the next slide. So, yeah, Paul, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what we don't have a great deal of time today, unfortunately, but what we'd focus on today is the one about good practice for local planning authorities and applicants working together on BNG. As part of that, Miriam and myself, we undertook, we took about 30 structured interviews overall over this winter. And really that was to have a look at a range of different types of schemes, not just residential-led schemes, but some commercial schemes, at a range of different scales, so smaller scale projects and much larger master planning projects across the country. It was important for us to get good examples from across the country rather than just focusing, I don't know, in Cambridgeshire or in London. We wanted to have a broad approach that looked at a range of different local planning authorities, some urban, some rural, and really come up with some interesting insights for people to share and to take away with them. That's the intention. I think I'll probably just start talking you through really the four projects that we looked at. The first one was by Urban and Civic, who I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. Urban Civic, a master planner, a strategic master planner. They take big projects, typically greenfield sites or brownfield sites, between 3,000 and 10,000 homes sometimes, and they provide the outline permission for those schemes. Once the outline permissions are received, they start cutting the sites up, and with their developer partners, they start building out the housing. The interesting thing about their model for Urban and Civic is that because they begin from the very beginning on large parcels of land, they're able to identify the green infrastructure, identify the BNG from quite an early stage, and build that into the overall master plan. The other one we were looking at is a scheme by Crowd 8 Homes, who are a smaller developer. They deliver about 400 to 500 homes annually. They're based in the southeast, and it's a scheme they brought forward in North Hertfordshire, and it's called Roundwood. I'll talk about that, and then another scheme was by Homes England, and this one is in Mid Sussex. And I think, as you all know, Homes England have got a government remit of investment and land delivery of schemes, and they typically take over schemes where the market has failed. They typically look at CPO or bringing together multiple land ownerships in a very challenging environment to deliver schemes at a larger scale. And I'll be touching on their scheme in Brooklyn in Mid Sussex. And the final one is a very unusual one. It's the rarest, I think, of all types of development that might come forward and have an impact on BNG. And this is a significant data centre campus in Northumberland, up in the northeast. And that was brought forward in a very sophisticated manner with the local authorities, so in this case the county, with the political leadership up there, and also with Advanced Northumberland, who were looking at economic development in the county. And they worked together with QTS data centres to bring forward a significant commercially led development for data centres in that area, which involved the Rule 4 of BNG, which is a very, very specific rule about landscape justification of BNG, where you have very significant impact on existing ecology. In this case, the ecology was a significant amount of open mosaic habitat. So, Chris, I thought what I'd do now is just go through each one in a little bit of detail. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, so the Urban and Civic scheme, we're just thankful. I don't know whether Richard's on the call, but there's Richard Quartermain, who's the head of sustainability over at Urban and Civic. He came on, he spent a bit of time with myself and Miriam, and he just went through really what their approach is. And he was quite clear about the challenges, and these challenges are universal for all developers, whether they're the scale of Urban and Civic or whether you're smaller schemes. I guess the key thing really for the site at Hulton in Rugby, that it actually started with quite a low baseline in terms of ecology. Quite low grade agricultural land, but even in quite low grade agricultural land, you do have certain things that come about when you start doing the surveys. In this case, it was greater crested newts. We know that there are obviously a protected species. So from the very early stage, Richard and his team looked at how the mitigation strategy for newts was built into the landscape design strategy for the development again, and this is a significant development. I think about 6,000 homes. So that allowed them at a strategic scale to really look at how the green infrastructure would be developed, what the corridors between the different sites were, and how to integrate those corridors within a nature reserve within the site. The big challenge for them was around working with English Natural England in terms of getting the licenses to work with the newts, and that needs to be properly programmed in and considered both with the local authority and Natural England. Ensuring that there was enough ecological expertise within their team, but also within the local authority, and assisting the local authority in terms of what that expertise means, not just for the planning application, but for the wider issue around explaining to the community out there, residents who are concerned about development on brownfield sites, on greenfield sites, but also what it means in terms of BNG. And that is, it's quite, as we know, the people who be on this call know, that's quite a complicated conversation to have. So taking that, the narrative around what BNG is, what development can deliver, and really talking about the positives on development and what you can actually provide as you develop the site out. So I guess for this scheme, the key aspects of good practice are around early engagement and pre-app, which Urban and Civic did for quite a long period prior to the application, and they benefited from working with Warwickshire County Council, who at the time, this was pre-mandatory BNG, were a pilot county for working it through, understanding what the challenges were and so on. And that helped Urban and Civic develop the metric and develop their response to it, which was actually quite positive, which they found on their sites. They can deliver in excess of the mandatory requirement for BNG if you start early enough and you take a considered approach to where the BNG might be located within a much larger scheme. Phasing is a key issue on that site. The Urban and Civic, as a mass developer, deliver the amenities, they deliver the education, but they also deliver the BNG all on site, within the site, outside of the housing sites. So the development partner comes on following permission and delivers those sites and doesn't need to worry too much about BNG because that's delivered at a strategic level quite early on. Similarly with the roads and transport connections. So the other lessons, I guess, were that I guess they've got lessons for developers, which we've got on here, which I've talked about, embedding BNG from the earliest opportunity, invest time in educating non-specialists, front load GI where possible. But for local planning authorities, I think Urban and Civic were quite keen to suggest to other developers that you really need to build ecological expertise, not just within your team, but within the local planning authority. And that the narrative that you use around BNG isn't just specific to these regs, but it's a narrative around healthy living, delivering good places that work for everybody. BNG also delivers health and well-being, also addresses issues around drainage and sustainable drainage, carbon sequestration and placemaking benefits. So that was it from Urban and Civic, Chris. I'll pop on to the next one. I am mindful of time. If you need some more on this, our report's just gone up on Becky's website as well, so you'll be able to access and read it at your leisure. The next one we looked at, and I think I'll keep it within the large scale stuff at the moment, and that's for the Homes England scheme at Brookley in Mid Sussex. So that was a scheme that Homes England took over some time back from various and multiple landowners. And at the very earliest stage, they started working with the local authority to understand really what the challenges are in delivering that site, and understand the challenges particularly in terms of BNG. You'll probably be aware as schemes of this size take a long time to develop, and they developed over phases, and those phases change. So once you've got outline permission for a couple of thousand homes, you may not necessarily be building that scheme as it was envisaged in outline. The market changes, the demand for different types of homes and so on changes all the time, and you've got to be flexible within those phases. And what Homes England do, they go back to the local authority on a regular basis to talk about what might happen as the phases come forward. Obviously, they're reviewing the BNG, which they deliver early on and on site, but all the other aspects around good homes and good development are considered, and that kind of iterative approach. The key lessons learned, I guess, for both the local authority and Homes England and that project is to start early and maintain a strong dialogue, particularly for these long-term schemes. Integrate BNG into master planning, always essential and got to be considered at the very beginning. Address stewardship, which I know is a very tricky issue for developers who might be on the call. How does that work across the 30-year period? How is it funded? Who's maintaining it and looking after it as it grows and develops? And again, similarly with urban and civic, front load infrastructure where possible. The other issue, I guess, is around specialists and specialist expertise, and Homes England were quite clear that they understood the absolute need to employ experts in ecology, experts in GI, green infrastructure, from the earliest stage to ensure they've got the knowledge and the wisdom to understand the metrics, to analyse the metrics and to deliver them. And that's a key aspect of it. So I think for developers, if you are looking at a site and you are developing your thoughts in terms of quantum, land use, so on and so forth, it's at that stage you really need to consider GI, and you really need to consider BNG, and you may need to get some expertise on board to kind of help you way through what is a very complex environment. So that's the second one, Chris. The third one I thought I might talk about is the Roundwood development in North Hertfordshire, and that was led by a smaller team called Crowdace Homes. And I've got to really thank Richard Kelly, who's the senior land manager at Crowdace, and Liz Anderson as well from the senior ecologist at North Herts for sharing their kind of wisdom on this project. Now, this, you won't be surprised, is another development scheme which has taken some time to get through planning, and they've had 2 or 3 bites at the cherry. Pleased to say it's got outline planning permission now, and it will come forward soon. I think the key thing really in terms of Crowdace, they're a smaller family-owned regional housing developer. As I say, build about 400 to 500 homes a year. And because they're a family-owned business, they've got a strong investment in the sites they develop. That kind of came across quite clearly in the interview. The key thing that Richard wanted to show, I think, with LPAs, I guess we'll start with, is to work with the local planning authorities and understand the challenges local planning authorities have on their resource in delivering your scheme. Consider pre-application and work with them, and ensure you've got a good baseline for your BNG before you start work. And I think that's the key to it. Crowdace entered into a pre-application a PPA, which they thought was very useful and helped unblock a lot of issues. But they did have some comments about the process, and I think we've included that in the report, Becky, that we've put in there. And really, that was the call for government actually to look perhaps in a bit more detail in terms of PPAs, what they involve, and perhaps make them a little bit more time focused, and perhaps make them a little bit less meetings focused, and to ensure really that the local planning authority and the developer work together at a quicker pace to deliver the application. I think their view, and it may be a view that developers have on the call today, is that process, that PPA process, is perhaps a little bit inconsistently applied across the country. That perhaps that might be in terms of programme, in terms of the benefits you get from it, and also in terms of the costs. So I think Crowdate and Richard was, was keen perhaps for government to look again at what that might mean and how they could consistently apply that across the country. Okay, and the final one, Chris, if I've still got time, I'm just checking.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Just to say, Paul, I think I'm causing confusion by sharing the slide as we talk, because this is just a sort of general insight. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then people can see you talking, and you're just talking through those, and then I'll put the slides back up in a sec. So I'll do that now.
Thanks, Becky. They may want to prefer to see the slide rather than myself, but there we go. Yeah, so the third one I've left till last, really, because it's the fourth one I've left till last because it's the most complicated one. And this is that one that I mentioned earlier on. It's about the delivery of outline planning permission for a large data centre campus in Northumberland. So this is one of those infrastructure of national significance. It's a strategically significant location. The site at Camboys was a brownfield site, but I think as those people who know a little bit about ecology know that ecology loves brownfield sites, and you end up producing very rare habitat called open mosaic habitat, which takes some time to establish and can only establish in certain conditions, particularly when it's left alone on sites like Camboy that haven't been touched really in 20 or 30 years. The scheme is substantial and would have required significant open mosaic habitat units on the BNG market. And when the county looked at that, and they looked at it with QTS, those units just aren't available on the market at the moment. The number of units they required, it would be impossible to find on the market. And if those units were provided further away, south of England and away from Northumberland, they would have attached such significant monetary costs to doing that the whole scheme would not be viable. Northumberland has a strong economic driver to deliver growth, to deliver jobs. Advanced Northumberland were key to that, and they worked with the county council really in securing an alternate location for the habitat units within Northumberland. That was a big win. It also required them to use rural foal to justify the strategic change in landscape, which hasn't been done before. So this was something that was within the regs. It's only to be done where you can justify that large-scale landscape impact. So it required working with the county ecologists, that's David Feiger and his team in Northumberland, and Arcadis, the ecology consultant who was working on for QTS, really to work together to unblock, to address the challenges and to come forward with appropriate solutions. That did take some time. It involved a lot of work with lawyers to test that their justification was sound from both sides, to test Advanced Northumberland's resolve in providing an alternative site, which they did, and to really bring the thing forward, because that was the political decision over in Northumberland to really drive that. And I think David and his team, particularly as officers, benefited from having very clear political consensus and direction from senior, both from senior officers and also from cabinet. And I think with that, the objective was clear for each. the direction was set, and has been delivered successfully to date. Those are the ones that I wanted to touch on, Chris. Hopefully that's useful. Do bear in mind, I'm kind of talking about from projects from structured interviews, and if I've made slight errors on that, then I certainly do apologise. But the actual written document, the report, is on Becky's website.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. I've put the slide back up there. So yeah, so this is just a summary really of all the insights and lessons. But as Paul said, I will just flip on to the next slide. So just here we've got the link there. I'm aware that you won't be able to click on that through here, but we'll make sure that's shared in due course. And yeah, just to say thanks really to all those involved in the case studies. Obviously, we're talking specifically about this sort of set, but we've had a whole host of folk involved in the case studies across the board, and it's been really, really brilliant to get that, to share that good practice. And I guess I just wanted to say a couple more thoughts, which is, you know, some elements of BNG remain challenging, but it is mostly accepted and embedded, and we are only 2 years in. I think the feeling is generally things should get a bit easier with upcoming changes, though I'm aware some people on the call may feel differently about that. I think the other thing is that BNG is making a difference. You know, I guess from an environmental point of view, it is making us think about the natural environment earlier on. And we definitely hear that from the case studies, don't we, Paul? It's around, you know, thinking about things early on. So I just thought I'd bring those in as final thoughts. Yeah, and do go to our web pages and look at these in detail. And I think that's it from me on the slide. So yeah, that's it. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I think is it fairly easy to find the report on the website? Is it fairly obvious?
What I will do is I will make sure it's tagged in our front page. So I
Okay, you'll
think
make sure it's there.
as I was
And
saying that,
yeah,
yes.
and if anybody is struggling to find it, email me at chris@futurehomes.org.uk, and I know that Becky will send me a link.
Yeah,
Send me
brilliant.
that link, should I say? Anyway, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got some questions that have come up while you've been talking, and I'm sure others will arise as discussion goes on. So the first one. I'm not 100% certain whether or not you feel you're qualified to answer this one, but from Alexandra, if we submit a planning application in early June for a brownfield site that's less than 0.2 hectares, will it be exempt?
Uh, I wouldn't want to answer definitively in the sense of you may be subject to other exemptions, but by the early June, the exemptions will not have changed. So the exemptions will be the same as they are now.
And
So
that's
obviously
because
there
we're
are some other
waiting
exemptions.
for
We're
government
waiting for,
time
yes, yeah, we're
to change
waiting
the
for, so
legislation.
there needs to be some changes to secondary legislation. So yeah, that I think wait and see on that. At the moment, they're aiming for the 31st of July. So it's likely not to be until at least that date, but there will be transitional arrangements that explain, you know, how that works. But I would say, yeah, unless you're looking probably into August, there wouldn't be any changes. But obviously, I can't say that your particular planning application wouldn't be exempt because it may fall under one of the other exemptions. So
Okay.
yeah.
I've got I've got a question about Rule 4, which I will come to later. I didn't expect to see a question about Rule 4, but so I will come back to you, Eleanor. But Melanie Horbury's asked a question about management fees, and it'd probably be nice if you just talk about it in general from what you are seeing. So Melanie says we've provided BNG on small sites for 10 units. However, the management fees are so expensive we cannot provide it on site going forward. And then she says, how will it be viewed? So yeah, so if the yes, so how do you cope with all of that when the management fee looks? I mean, and bearing in mind, of course, that builders have you know, people want to buy a house and are very sensitive to management fees.
It's not something that I'm specifically getting into. So we're specifically getting into at the Planning Advisory Service because we're focused on the sort of planning elements. But I know it's something that actually the Future Homes Hub have been looking at. So I suspect it may be the subject of a future lunch and learn actually around that sort of adoption and looking forward. But we do know it's an issue in terms of, you know, that ongoing management. And it's what's really, really important for Biodiversity Net Gain is making sure the management needs to be for significant habitat creation on site. It has to be secured for 30 years. So, I mean, in a specific site, you'll need to look at what conditions, what arrangements, what's been agreed through that planning application, and I wouldn't know that, and whether it counts as significant. But generally, we're looking really long term, and that's a really big change, for the planning system as a whole in terms of securing in the long term. And how do you do that? And how does that work for management fees? And I think, that there are just challenges generally with creating biodiversity net gain on small sites, really, just because of the constraints on site. So we know about that, but I'm afraid I sort of can't, I can't answer the specific question on, how it will be viewed going forward on that site. I think it would depend on the circumstances.
And a question for me is when does biodiversity net gain become significant and therefore need management? What do we regard as significant as opposed to presumably insignificant?
Yeah, so there's some guidance on DEFRA's website actually about that and what's considered significant. So if you go to, I mean, either go to the PAS website and look at our frequently asked questions, and that will direct you through to there, or just again, if you look at for biodiversity net gain guidance, and there's the planning practice guidance. So there's a lot of guidance out there from government, which is worth looking at around that. I mean, in the end, there's not hard and fast rules around what counts as significant, but there's some really good sort of principles around what it should do. And also, if you speak to the local authority in your area, they may have some more specific. Some have set out some quite clear guidelines around what they would consider significant, because basically the decision is with the local authority as to whether it's considered significant. But it would generally be, where there's been creation of in terms of what it relates really to what how it differs from what was there on site to begin with, really, and that being classed as significant. So it's about, a significant creation or enhancement of habitat.
And in response to Melody's specific question, it really would be you would expect that the local authority is going to be wanting to see that there is that ongoing management plan. And
I think if they have,
probably be,
yeah,
it
I
will
think if
probably be
it's
viewed
been,
not well if they can't provide it.
I would expect so if it has been, if it's been asked for as part of the planning application, yes, yeah. And obviously the whole point of biodiversity net gain is that it is provided as part of that work. So yeah, I would think that the local authority would be following it up if it's not possible to do it.
Yeah, okay. And I have noticed a comment in the chat from Natalie actually on this. So thank you, Natalie. So she was just saying that it's important that through planning we accept that there's a realistic on site, that what is realistic on site. So whilst we are ecologists, and I assume that Natalie therefore is an ecologist, not landowners and managers, we generally point out when it is unrealistic. And from a developer's perspective, it's important that the developers have those conversations with the development teams, planners, landscapes, ecologists. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean,
okay.
it's one of the things that came out really strongly from this work was about thinking early on about what's possible and what's going to be possible. And part of that will be thinking about it's not just creating the habitat or enhancing the habitat, it's about how do you, allow that, enable that to be there for 30 years. And you need to do that early on in your, design work. And that's, definitely something that you saw through this work, wasn't it, Paul? Have that collaboration, have those conversations, think about it early on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, because we were looking at good practice, as I mentioned earlier, and that seems to be one of the hallmarks of good practice is engage early and iteratively as you're working through the scheme during pre-app, ideally, and certainly in advance of submitting a planning application.
Okay. Una Harron has asked, what support and guidance will be available to LPAs in applying BNG to NSIPs? And could you remind me what an NSIP is, please?
Yes, so an NSIP is a nationally significant infrastructure project. So they're basically projects that are not dealt with by local authorities, that they're decided through a separate process. They're usually sort of particularly large or of particular significance. So in terms of support and guidance to local planning authorities, we will be looking at, so we have that as part of our sort of program. We have an NSIPS program at the Planning Advisory Service, and we'll be looking at that as part of that program. And we also have an NSIPS network. So I'm not sure sort of who Una works for, but if she works for a local authority, she's welcome to email us and ask to join that network, and there'll be more information coming
Okay.
through. But I guess it's important to note that LPAs themselves would not be applying the BNG unless they're doing the NSIP themselves. They're a statutory consultee, but they will have a role in terms of the post-consent work on biodiversity net gain for NSIP. So
Okay, thank
yeah.
you very much. And while we're talking about those sorts of things, so Eleanor Story was asking, can you point to where there is more info on Rule 4 on the Cambois case, please?
Yeah. Well, it is within our report, and it is accessible from the County Council's planning website. We at Urban Design Learning, I'm just looking at my training events for this coming year. Hopefully Becky and I'll have a conversation about this next week, where we'll be looking at the different reports and we'll be adding some flesh to them, and that'll mean we'll be looking at the schemes in a bit more detail. Spatially, we'll be looking at the diagrams, the drawings, the design access statement, and so on. So if you are a local authority officer, you can sign up to Urban Design Learning's program, and you can get access to all of our events, some of which do include BNG. David Feiger, the county ecologist, has written a very interesting blog on Cambois. Now, Becky's nodding. I think that's on the Natural England website, is it, Becky?
Yeah, I think if you, I think again, if you just search up Natural England blog, then you should be able to find a list of all their recent blogs, and that'll be one of them. So yeah, that's definitely worth looking at in terms of the detail on the Rule 4 side of things. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the thing is with the Rule 4, obviously, it's absolutely it's nothing if not totally exceptional, and the likelihood of very many planning authorities actually ever going through the Rule 4 justification is quite unlikely. Perhaps unless you've got a significant, nationally significant piece of infrastructure that you're delivering.
Okay.
And just to
Thank you.
say also, we've got a little bit of guidance on Rule 4 and how it's been used by different local authorities as well on our webpage. So if you, again, just look up PAS, BNG exemptions, there's a page, and it covers a little bit about Rule 4 there as well. So worth looking at that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Andy Sheldon's asked, there doesn't seem to be any guidance on what constitutes the cutoff point in terms of loss of developable area to provide BNG on site and off site credits become acceptable as a solution. Any views? I mean, you might be able to say, well, maybe you do know some guidance, or
I don't think there is any guidance, but that doesn't mean that there definitely isn't. I mean, I think it's just a case by case basis, really, and I guess that's can be frustrating. I think one thing I should say though is just to be really, really clear about credits versus units, because people get quite a lot of confusion about this. So, biodiversity net gain on site, you're providing habitats on site, either by creating new ones or enhancing existing ones. Biodiversity net gain off-site units, it's the same. But on a different outside your planning application area, you're creating or enhancing habitat off-site. There is a third option, which is the last resort, which is buying credits from Natural England. So Natural England had a biodiversity net gain credit system where you can just buy. You don't have to get involved in sort of with a habitat bank or landowners on that side. It's just you buy the credits. It tends to be the most expensive solution just because it's the last resort, but it's worth bearing in mind there's those three options. Yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, I think one of the things it's again worth, I mean, it's frustrating, I know, at this stage to say think about it early on, but I think it's something it's very much worth thinking about very early on in your decision making about whether to even, take on a site to develop, is how might you deal with the BNG on that site? Because obviously, because it's a percentage, it's based on what's there at the moment. So obviously, if you're talking about a site that has very high biodiversity value, that's going to be very difficult to do 10% of, to add 10%
Yes,
to
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah. I
you're
mean, and
developing that line. So I think sort of coming in terms of the developable area, obviously, ideally, you want to be starting off with a site that has low biodiversity value in the first place, which should mean that you have less BNG to provide on site on the developable area. So I realise that's not helpful if you've got a site already that needs
yeah,
that, but
yeah, yeah.
that really is worth thinking about really early on.
Okay. Um, Robin Waddell's got a question. As most volume house builders are passing ownership responsibility for on-site BNG onto residents, how can local authorities ensure that the residents are actually fulfilling their BNG 30-year obligations?
Okay. So I think we're getting into yeah, questions that I don't necessarily have the answers to because I'm not a practitioner myself. So I would probably want to defer to some of the local authority folk who are on the call on this. But essentially that would be part of the discussion around on-site BNG. Is it possible to deliver that, and how is it going to be delivered, and demonstrating that is going to be ensured. It's worth noting that gardens are not, they can't, you can't use private gardens to deliver BNG. So in terms of residents, that's not acceptable. So it would generally not be yeah, it would generally not be sort of private land sorry, private land in that sense, private gardens. So, but I'm afraid that's a bit outside my, I definitely want to ask the folk that actually do this rather than make some assumptions on that one. So,
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. I've got a question from an anonymous one. This one. Will the good practice include the expected level of survey effort implemented, particularly for grassland surveys? There are major gaps in the government guidance, particularly around grassland, about grassland surveys in particular. The current guidance assumes a level of competence, but in reality, we get a worrying number of reports with insufficient survey effort from surveyors with a lack of knowledge of detailed botanical surveys. I'm assuming this is something from an LPA.
Yeah.
We waste a lot of time pushing back and asking for more information, particularly quadrat date. Quadrat date?
I think data, perhaps.
Oh, data. Okay.
Yeah.
But as it is not specifically written down under the BNG guidance, we get a lot of pushback on matters which are common sense.
Yeah. Shall I
So,
take that one? Shall I
yeah,
take
yeah,
that
yes,
one,
please,
Becky?
Paul. That's definitely
Yeah.
way bit outside of my remit.
Yeah, well, thanks, Anonymous, because what you've done there, you just framed some real challenges that LPAs have in terms of the quality of the applications that come forward, and a lot of local authorities now. One of our other reports I've just got here is called "Making the Most of Scarce Ecological Expertise," and in that we drop in a couple of case studies around validation, essentially. And as local authorities now, those ones that are, that are kind of up to speed on issues and are aware that it's all about the quality of the data and it's all about the quality of application very early on. They're finding that there's a real inconsistency in terms of the quality of those applications, which they then have to decline or push back because they haven't got the level of information required. So the solution for that really is that local authorities are now putting together more detailed validation notes, that they are training their validation officers to have an understanding of BNG, and they're also providing local advice notes to clearly identify to developers and their agents precisely what's expected of them as part of as the planning application progresses, really to ensure that they've got the baseline data correct in the first place. But it is a challenge for local authorities, Chris, because it blocks it blocks things up. It takes time, and then they have to go back. A lot of local authorities are doing what they're terming triaging. So they're having informal conversations with developers and land agents quite early on, just to have a discussion with them about have you got the right baseline, have you got an understanding of where you're going, even before the application's put in. And we're finding that kind of early conversation, the early discussion, has been quite helpful in smoothing development applications through the process.
But both from local authority officers' point of view, who've got a million other things to do on their plates, and also from developers' point of view, I mean, is there any national guidance on this thing on particularly on this grassland survey stuff that is possible for local authorities to look at, so that we all know how we're all working, or is
I'm
it got to work it out for yourself in your local area?
I'm not aware of it. There is guidance around HAB surveys, which is out there. I think the bigger challenge that from the LPAs side they have is the lack of quality and consistent professional advice that developers get as part of their planning process. So developers, we always encourage them to get the right experts on and to get them on quite early on. It'll save them time down the line, and sort of front loading some fees for ecology work actually will benefit at the back end of it if you get your planning permission rather earlier. But as I say, the expectations from different authorities are different. And it isn't, and there's not a national consensus on that. So my view there would be you do need to engage with your local authorities to ensure that the expectations they have are the ones that you're going to meet,
Okay, well, thank you
than
very much. Okay.
using a study that you did in a different part of the country.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That ends our Q&A. Before you go and leave us, though, please complete our one question poll. It's appearing on your screen. And while you do that, I want to thank Becky and Paul for joining us and sharing their experience and telling us all about their reports and the work that they're doing. If you want to get in touch, as I said earlier, with any further questions, or particularly where you're struggling to find information, we refer to a variety of websites. Please email me at chris@futurehomes.org.uk. As I said at the beginning, we are putting together a major programme of webinars, site visits and conferences, with many of these around the Future Home Standard because it's just been released. And I would particularly like to highlight the Future Home Standard technical conferences in Leeds on the 9th of June and in London on the 17th of June. And also a May site visit to the Passive House Centre in Matlock. To find out more, please look at our website. You should be able to see the link for events there. Meanwhile, have a productive afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us.
Right. Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.